And welcome. We're live streaming across the internet right now. We'll be starting Political Trade Secrets in less than 4 minutes, and looking forward to a great show today. We're going to be talking about raising up future leaders for the Grand Opportunity Party. And my guest today is going to be Scherie Murray, who is a New York GOP Committeewoman, coalition member for Black Americans for Trump, also a political analyst, and who I met at Newsmax in studio, and we'll play a clip from that as well and get her thoughts about what it takes to build up the next generation of GOP leaders and what she sees about that. We'll talk about the 2028 nomination for president and who that might be and her thoughts on that, as well as I'll get her thoughts about the upcoming State of the Union this evening. As we're doing this live stream. So wherever you are watching this on social media, thank you for doing so. But do follow us on social media. You'll get notified when we go live for these live streams, and you'll be able to get a little bit extra content like this right now, where I share extra details. So late last night, local news TV stations in Montana that we've partnered with polling in the past, they released our new exclusive U.S. Senate race poll for the state on Senator Daines, where he's at. And you can go to pollingclub.com and you can actually get the entire poll. It's very fascinating. Daines, we hear about the 2026 midterm elections and how those might be tough for Republicans. But one thing I can tell you is every single matchup that we tested. So it's possible the Democrats are trying to push an independent candidacy. John Tester is reported to be trying to get one of the former university presidents to run as an independent and try to block the Democrats from having a nominee and somehow trick people in Montana to vote for an independent who's actually a Democrat. Well, what we found out is while he does a little bit better, his name's Bodner, Seth Bodner, he does a little bit better as an independent. The truth is that Senator Daines is actually well positioned to beat whoever it is. And if it's a three-way with a Democrat, independent, and Senator Daines, it's a really big win. So that's great news for the 2026 midterm. So go to pollingclub.com. You can get all those insights. We're going to be doing a series of these kinds of Senate polls, and we really hope that people check those out. And if you're part of the polling club, you can suggest questions, topics for us to cover. We have premium members. We also have elite members. If you're an elite member, you can actually determine the state and the focus of a poll, and we have people who do that. And I'm going to actually, when I talk to Scherie, I'm going to talk to her about New York, where she's located, and Mamdani, and we did a lot of polling for the mayor's race. I'm curious as to how she thinks that's going with the recent snowstorm. I'm not quite sure it's going so great. So with that, go to pollingclub.com and suggest that you can be part of our community there. And a couple of other things. If you like what we're doing, a way to help is to like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform that you like to go to listen to your podcast or watch your podcast. That really does make a difference for the show, and we really do appreciate it. And it looks like we are all over the internet right now on 15 platforms, and we have people streaming in. So if you want to ask questions during the show, you can be part of the conversation. We'll bring them in, and you can be asking questions of me and Scherie about the future of the Grand Opportunity Party. It's time for the show.
Welcome to Political Trade Secrets, an inside look at campaigns and politics, where we pull back the curtain, look under the hood, and investigate all aspects of politics and how elections are won. Now, here's your host, Dustin Olson.
Pollster and host of the Political Trade Secrets podcast, Dustin Olson.
Dustin Olson.
Dustin Olson.
And Dustin Olson, pollster at American Polls. They work for both Republicans and Democrats. And he hosts a podcast, Political Trade Secrets. Oh, we love that. We like that podcast.
Now, from Washington, D.C., is pollster Dustin Olson.
And welcome to Political Trade Secrets. I'm your host, Dustin Olson. Thank you all for being here and for participating in the show and for caring about your country such that you want to pull back the curtain, find out how politics actually works, and really what we're here to do is to empower you, to give you maybe a little bit more understanding of how the whole machine works: politics, the media, propaganda, how people are trying to manipulate you, all of that stuff. Anyway, we're grateful to be able to kind of pull back the curtain and look under the hood and help you understand how politics really works, and why I'm very excited to have our guest today, Scherie Murray, who is a New York GOP Committeewoman. She's also a coalition member of Black Americans for Trump, and a political commentator. And in a moment, we'll see her and myself in studio at Newsmax and talking about, a little bit of how, unfortunately, things have worked. We talked about the recent unprecedented and amazing level of fraud that's been uncovered in Minnesota and other places around the country, and we'll see that, and then we'll bring her in. But wherever you like to watch your podcasts, listen to your podcasts, please do like, follow, and subscribe. It really does help the show. And one of the things I want to also mention is this morning we released our new Montana U.S. Senate poll as part of our polling club community. And if you'd like to be part of helping give the American people a voice when it comes to the media and having their opinions known, you can go to pollingclub.com, join the polling club. You can do it for free. You can become a premium member also, but you get to help us determine what questions we ask the American people and help give them voice so they can be part of the conversation. And then you can help shape that conversation by suggesting the questions and topics that we cover. So please go there. Very fascinating results. Montana is a state that has moved really quickly over the last few years. And I think Republicans now could call it a safely red state. There's very few conservative Democrats left, or Union Democrats, who want to vote for Democrats, and they're now pretty much Republicans. So that's a fascinating thing. But in a moment, we're going to have Scherie Murray. She's the New York GOP Committeewoman. She's a coalition member of Black Americans for Trump and a political analyst. And I'm really going to be interested in seeing what she thinks about where the party's going, and where who are the future leaders of the party, and how we can raise those people up. It's something that she's passionate about, and get her thoughts on that. We'll talk about the State of the Union. We'll talk about many different issues that are important. She's there in New York City, and specifically in Queens, and where President Trump is also from. And I'd like to get her insights as to, being someone from Queens, where the president is, what special insights she might have because of that. But before we bring her in, I'm going to go to this segment that we did. She and I were on National Report on Newsmax, and you should check it out. It's every weekday morning from 9 to noon on Newsmax, and we were in there for the whole show and giving our commentary. And I thought this was a particularly good segment where we were able to talk about the situation in Minnesota and the fraud that people have been uncovering. So with that, we'll go to the clip.
President Trump says California is corrupt. Point blank asking the congressman, he agreed. Your thoughts there?
Absolutely. And there are more states across the country, including New York, including Illinois, including Colorado, that better buckle up and get ready for the new Assistant Attorney General, which was unveiled yesterday by our Vice President, who's going to weed out fraud, waste, and abuse across the country. Governor Newsom wants to talk tough. Bring it on. We saw what happened with Maduro.
Yeah, the great point to the new Attorney General, and I think that's a big focus of this administration. And this really got busted wide open with Minnesota. Yep. And now you're seeing other states are coming. I spoke to people in Maine about this, and they said, hey, wait a minute, we have fraud in our state in regards to their main health care programs. California is sounding the alarm. There are many others. You pointed to Illinois. Talk to us about that, what we could see, Dustin, coming down the pike with this administration, with an attorney general looking into this?
Well, I think it's absolutely brilliant that the administration is doing this, and of the policies that the president is pursuing. So the Harvard-Harris poll every month comes out with a poll that tracks all the policies that the administration is doing, and this is one of the most popular. 77% of the voters approve of the efforts to go within government and seek out this fraud, waste, and abuse. And that's a pretty high number. The only thing higher than that is their efforts on immigration and then reducing drug prices. So this is what people want to see happen. And one thing I would just point out is whenever you have huge amounts of money in a situation and you have no oversight, you have a 100% guarantee to have fraud. And I think for some of these people in California and other places, this is a feature, not a bug. They like to have this.
Will this come back to haunt, to your point, Dustin, will this come back to haunt Governor Newsom, where he says, bring it on, the investigation?
Absolutely. I mean, President Trump's administration, they don't play any games. We've even seen the Agriculture Secretary, Brooke Rollins, ask for SNAP recipients' information to be turned over to the federal government. So it's just a matter of time until they clamp down on the fraud, waste, and abuse across the country.
All right, Dustin, Scherie, thank you very much.
All right, and we'll bring in Scherie Murray, and really great to have her with us today. As I mentioned before, she is a New York GOP Committeewoman, as well as a coalition member of Black Americans for Trump, and of course a political analyst, as you got to see there. And I think that was a lot of fun being there that day, and Sean does a great job with the interviews. And with that, we can bring up Scherie now. All right, Scherie, great to be here and spend time with you today. And thank you for taking the time to talk about your career and what you've been doing in politics and shedding some light on some important issues. And I'm reminded of you just right now, I think you're dealing with the snowstorm up there in New York City. We at American Pulse did a lot of polling for the New York City mayor's race. And we actually were one of the closest. We had I think the race within, I think it was 8 points or something like that. But everyone else was overestimating what Mamdani was going to do. And we said that was not likely. But I think people may have overestimated what he could actually do in office. And what's your impression so far with the mayor and how he is doing as mayor?
Well, Dustin, thank you for having me. It's definitely a pleasure to be with you here on Political Trade Secrets. And yes, as you mentioned, I'm here in the state of New York, specifically New York City, by way of Queens, the home of our great president, Donald J. Trump. And unfortunately, we did have Mayor Zoran Kwame Mamdani elected back in November, to the disappointment of many. But he did win. And as you mentioned, we are going through a horrific snowstorm. We got a second beating yesterday where our kids was out of school. And, the mayor decided that today would be a good day to send the kids back to school. And everyone has a different situation, but my particular situation with the mayor deciding that today was a good day to go back to school was that the Long Island Railroad wasn't working. And so we had to find alternate commute options for my daughter to get to Manhattan this morning, which was treacherous.
I bet.
Yeah. And so that's just in part one of the things we've had to deal with, his handling of the second snowstorm under his tenure. And we know that mayors get hit with snowstorms, and it definitely shapes their tenure as to they'll be a good manager of city services. And, right now, in terms of a grade that I would give the mayor for his management skills, I would give him perhaps maybe a C. Yeah, he hasn't done a good job, especially with the first snowstorm back in January.
Well, he killed homeless people. I mean, he didn't literally kill them. I don't understand what that's about. So it's some sort of radical left position that they're so against moving homeless people and moving them in off the street, like their personal autonomy or whatever. I don't know. There's some sort of like philosophical reason they refuse to help them. And we had however many people. How many people is it now that froze to death?
People that died. I think it was 13 due to
Wow.
hypothermia, and then the remainder died in their homes due to the cold as well. But that is in part, that's a two-part issue where the mayor, tried to get the homeless people off the streets. But the homeless people, if they, also known as unhoused people, if they don't want to come off the street, it makes it increasingly difficult. So I'm not going to totally put the blame all on the mayor on that one, but in terms of management skill and style, they could have been more proactive instead of reactive, and that would have been more of a help to the people who are unhoused.
Yeah. Where I'm from originally, I was born in Denver, Colorado, and grew up in Colorado, in rural Colorado. And when I was a kid in Denver, we had this huge snowstorm. Colorado has blizzards and that happens, but it was a huge snowstorm similar to what we had a couple of weeks ago. And Mayor McNichols, who was at the time a fairly popular mayor, he failed to handle that snowstorm. He had dump trucks out trying to like drive over the snow because they didn't have enough plows. It was a complete disaster, and he was defeated for reelection because of that. They threw him out, and ever since then, in the state, if you are the governor or you are a mayor, you know the cautionary tale of Mayor McNichols. And I don't know that, I mean, Mom Donnie is a pretty young fella. I don't know that he has a lot of, understands a lot of history, and he doesn't know stories like that. I don't think he probably realized how, how important this is. And I'm curious, I don't know much about this story, but what's going on with this whole thing with people shoveling snow and licenses and whatever else is going on with the mayor? Like, do you know about that and what's going on there?
Yeah, there's some irony there, Justin. We know that, legislators in DC are trying to move forward the Save America Act, which calls for, photo ID upon voting, and also, to prove your citizenship when you register to vote. Now, because we had this tumultuous snowstorm, the mayor has definitely kicked it back to federal law, saying that ID is required for snow shovelers. So they need to bring two proofs of ID in order to get paid by city government for shoveling snow. And so the irony here is that we need to have people show ID to shovel snow, but they shouldn't show ID to vote.
That's crazy. It is truly crazy, and I don't know if they see the inconsistency or if they don't care or what it is, but it is remarkable to think that that isn't obvious to them, that they don't get the irony of that. Well, I'm curious, how did you actually first get into politics? You're located in Queens now. Is that where you were born and raised?
No, I was born in Jamaica, West
Oh,
Indies.
really? Oh, cool.
Migrated to this country legally when I was 8 years old. I am definitely proud to be a naturalized American citizen. I revere this great country. I do have a place in my heart for Jamaica, but America has been my home for many decades now. And how I got involved in politics is pretty basic. You're a citizen of this country, you get affected by city services, and you wonder, hey, why did this happen? And how could I make a difference? And so it was really the swings in my local park. They, did
Really?
renovations. Yeah. And the local city council member said that we invested 1.1 million into the local park. And I'm like, wait, no, you did not. And so that began my journey of looking into who this person was, what he does as a local city councilman, and realized the untruths that he was telling in terms of how he was taking care of our community. And I said, well, if he could do it, I could do it too. not realizing the vitriol that came with being a Republican in a city like Southeast Queens, which is a predominantly Black community here in the heart of Queens, New York City.
That's awesome. And we have a comment from Renee. She says, good for you, Scherie. And also says, spot on interview, way to go. And she has a question, going to city services. Where does the money come from to pay for the shovelers?
The taxpayers, of course. And so they're shoveling on the backs of the taxpayers. And so, the mayor doubled where we started at $15 an hour. Now they're up to $30 an hour, and up to 1 p.m. today, which I think we just passed that threshold. You can report to any sanitation facility and get your shovels as long as you have your 2 pieces of ID and start to shovel snow.
That's fascinating. It's just fascinating, the whole situation. Now, so you grow up in Queens. It probably a little bit of different experience than Donald Trump had growing up in Queens. He didn't come from Jamaica, but he's definitely Queens. What is it that is somebody who lives in Queens, who's had most of your life there? What is it that we should know, the rest of the country should know about Donald Trump and the fact that he is from Queens, and what maybe other people don't understand, but if you're from Queens, you totally get it?
Well, Queens has lawmakers that are predominantly Democratic, right? And so oftentimes they'll demonize not just our president, but the Republican Party, which I like to call the Grand Opportunity Party, #GOP. And so, not everyone here in Queens hates Donald Trump. There is a MAGA movement in the borough of Queens as well. When President Trump came to New York City, he didn't come to Queens, but he came to the Bronx. Yeah. But hundreds and hundreds of people from all over, New York City, New York State, totaling up to thousands of people came to see him. And he's always going to have that Queens love. He's from here, and no one can ever take that away from him.
Well, is there a little bit of the stuff that shocks people? Is that Queens, or is that just Donald Trump?
I would think it's President Donald Trump. He doesn't hold back. And so I think that's what some of us may love about him, but it's a double-edged sword where some others may not appreciate his candid manner.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a feature, not a bug. In my opinion, it's what gets a lot of things done. Now, so you got involved because of the swings and in the park. And were you a Republican or Democrat at that time, or didn't really think much about it, or from being an immigrant to the country and being a little bit more probably aware of even more of the American founding and principles, I'm guessing more so than a lot of people who were native born. Is that what it was? What was it that had you decide I'm a Republican?
Well, that is a great and fascinating question, and I won't go too far into the weeds, Dustin. But what I will say is, as all migrants, when they come to this great nation, depending on the state that they migrate to, here in New York, it's a predominantly Democratic state. And in order for you to participate in local elections, those elections during the primary season are mostly Democratic. So we always fall into that Democratic voter registration. But for me, when I was in college, I actually learned more about American history and the founding of the political parties. And I learned that the Republican Party was the party of anti-slavery. It was the abolitionist party. And going a little bit deeper into my family history, migrating from Jamaica, I talked with my mom, and that was a very important conversation when I decided to run for office. Where should I stand on this issue? And she told me that our party affiliation in Jamaica was the Jamaica Labor Party, which is a conservative movement, and we had strong allies with the Republican Party. So it all came full circle and made a lot of sense when I decided to run as a Republican here in Southeast Queens.
That's a fascinating story. So that political party there, I think most Americans would assume because it has the word labor in it that it may not be the conservative. But that's the thing about comparative politics to countries around the world is that you can't just assume based on the labels. It's not as always obvious. But so, what was their movement there, and if they've been in power, or what? Tell us a little bit about that. That's interesting to me.
Yeah, well, the Jamaica Labour Party versus the People's National Party. So you have the JLP and the PNP. We're talking about Jamaican politics.
I love it.
But the PNP party is more in line with the Democratic Party, as you saw President Obama go to Jamaica when he was in office. At that time, we had the People's National Party in office in Jamaica. And most notably, he went to Jamaica during that leadership time and, boasted Wagwan Jamaica,
Mhm.
and so that was a very memorable moment. But in terms of history, the Jamaica Labour Party had strong ties with the Republican Party. And it was a result of, aggressive trade, a trade relationship with our prime minister at the time and our president at the time here in America.
That's fascinating. This is something I like about doing the show is I get to find out about things I never ever would have thought I would get to find out about, and that's interesting to me. And right now we have in Japan, for instance, the prime minister there is among other things, she's a heavy metal rock fan, but she's also a conservative and a China hawk, and very closely aligned with the United States. And something that people may not know, but there's all sorts of movements around the world that embrace frankly the liberty minded principles that the Republican Party has. And one of the first people I helped get elected, this has been 24 years ago, was a fellow by the name of Ed Jones. At the time, he was a commissioner, a wonderful man. This is in Colorado Springs, Colorado. His district was heavily Democrat, but he'd grown up in Mississippi in the Jim Crow South, and he was African American. And he was a Republican because for his family, that was the party that advocated for him to be able to vote or easily vote, and didn't try to block him. And that for me early in my career had a big impact. And it's not surprising that the biggest issue that he focused on was education, and he actually is the reason why Colorado has charter schools and expanded educational choice. A great man. He hasn't been involved in politics for a while, but anyway, that for me was the moment I got the bug, because his being elected from a Democrat leaning district actually flipped the Senate in the state, which was what allowed them to be able to get these things passed, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome, Dustin. And when I got the bug, after learning more about the Republican Party's history, I ran for office. I ran for, municipal office as a city council. I also ran for assembly, where I got the support and endorsement of the New York State Republican Party. And the party leaders was, definitely very impressed, where they asked me if I wanted to serve as a state committee woman. And so from that point on, I was duly elected as a state committee woman representing Southeast Queens here in New York City.
That's awesome. And what does it take to run for that? Is it a pretty aggressive campaign, or how's that work? Northeast politics for a lot of people in the rest of the country generally is more aggressive than politics in other parts of the country, and people do take it seriously. What's that like running for those offices there?
Well, running for elected office, such as a city or state or even a federal seat, which I did also run against AOC back in 2019, the position that I'm elected to right now is a party position, which I serve on the hierarchy of the New York State Republican Party. And in my role as a state committee woman, what we really do is field candidates for public office. We help our candidates get on the ballot. In fact, I think I shared this story with you as a state committee woman, going around, just talking to my neighbors in my community when it's that time of the year to get signatures for our petitions to get our candidates on the ballot, I actually registered a young man who ended up some 10 years later coming back to me and saying, hey, you registered me to vote as a Republican 10 years ago, and now I want to run for state assembly. And I ran his campaign.
That's awesome. So that goes to something that you're passionate about, which is building up the future leaders of the Grand Opportunity Party, and that's a great example of being out there talking to people and encouraging someone to be engaged, and then they end up being a candidate themselves. But what is it that you think the party has been doing well when it comes to fielding candidates, and what is it that you think that maybe they're not doing as well, or maybe there might be something missing that if we were to do it, it might make a difference?
Well, Dustin, you're in the numbers business, right? With polling, right? And
Mhm.
that's just one aspect of it. When we look at races, oftentimes, party leaders look at winnable seats where their money would be best invested. And that's also a numbers game. And so one of the things that I think that the party can do more of is going into areas that don't often see the party. So you can build up that constituency for them to understand that the Republican Party hears you, they sees you, and they're willing to come into your community and understand your needs and quite possibly deliver on those needs. And so that's, I think, an area that we can be, strengthened in. But the Republican Party on the national level has a very, very deep bench.
Yeah.
But in order to really sustain that over the next generation, we definitely have to, penetrate that down ballot ticket, as we say, those down ballot races. And that starts in the local city council, local assembly, and even moving upward to the federal seats as well.
Yeah, it's a great point. And when you think about the national, and tonight we're going to see a lot of them in the State of the Union, leaders that have come about in the last decade, and many of them in the cabinet with the president. I think, objectively speaking, there's a lot of people with TDS who will not admit to it, but it is, I think it's objectively true that this is one of the most accomplished cabinets that we've ever seen. And the president's been able to bring people around him like that. But it is true that there's a higher talent level on the Republican side than on the Democrat side. Now, the Democrats have things going for them. They have a lot of money. They have their whole constellation of NGOs and outside groups, and they're left-wing billionaires who fund stuff, and they have the media, which still, in our polling, podcasts, live streams, internet shows are about the same uh, influence as far as audience as the mainstream media is. It's about to cross over where those alternative sources are going to be higher than the mainstream media. However, the mainstream media still drives narratives, still focuses people on what stories get the headlines. You can see it over the last couple of months. I was thinking back to, I saw you in January and we talked about the Minnesota fraud thing. That's been wiped from the headlines. All it took is left-wing billionaires and some other malinfluences to pay for riots in Minneapolis to change public opinion, which it has, not completely, and I can go into that more if you're interested. But it's definitely affected public opinion, and it has effectively taken out of the news that whole story. But with all that stuff that we don't really win on national politics, we have done a good job, as you've pointed out, in building a bench. And how did we do that? Like, what's your impression as to how we actually accomplished that?
Well, I, attribute us realizing how deep our bench is to President Trump. I mean, he has some rock stars as a part of his cabinet. But to your point, the media, left leaning, they do control the narrative. And there's massive TDS. I think it should be a clinical diagnosis. Even Robert De Niro was just on a recent podcast, and I can't imagine a grown man of his stature crying because President Trump is our current president. But I digress.
It's pretty pathetic.
No, yeah, it really is.
It ruins his tough guy image, I have to say.
It does, and it makes me not want to watch his movies. But that's just, a person.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a new movie, I think it's on Netflix, where he plays a former president. The plot sounds kind of good, but I specifically chose not to watch it recently because it has him.
Yeah, but to your query, Dustin, we do have a very, very deep bench. When we entered into the 2016 presidential election, Marco Rubio was a presidential contender, and he was doing very, very well in the state of New York. Although President Trump squeaked out and won the primary across the country, I've had my eye on him since that time. And when President Trump appointed him as the Secretary of State, he has really shown his maturity, his dominance, his experience. He has what it takes, I do believe, to be a strong contender in 2028.
Yeah. So to that topic, so you think that Marco Rubio could very well be the nominee?
I'm not going to jump off of a bridge and put that, cement that in this podcast. I don't want to break any news over here. But I do have him as one of my favorites. Vice President J.D. Vance is our current vice president, and we often see the vice president, after the president's tenure has concluded, go off and try to vie for the presidency. That's going to be an interesting, take, as we have those two rock stars at the very top of the ticket. But I think Marco Rubio is really commanding our foreign policy and has a depth of knowledge as it relates to our domestic policy. And so I'm interested to see what that ticket would actually look like.
Yeah. And we have a comment from the audience. Absolutely. He is a true statesman. And by the way, wherever you're watching, if you're watching this on the live stream, or if you're watching it later on a podcast, you can go ahead and post comments or reviews, and we will follow up with our answers. But feel free to ask questions and join the conversation right now. I do think that, so I'm not making any news either, but I do think there's going to be a bit of a campaign of people who are going to be trying to recruit him to run for the presidency. And I think it's smart for him to not actively seek it and have it thrust upon him if that's what happens. Now, the ticket would be amazing, and it also would be wise for him to keep his powder dry and be the running mate. And if it works out for Vance, that's great. And then he's the vice president, and he's still young. I mean, he would be, I think he's in his mid 50s. He would be in his mid 60s when he gets to run for president. So, all that could work out pretty well for Rubio, and he would just have even more experience. Now, one thing that's interesting about Vance, he's not been front and center on some of these international relations issues recently. He's not been pictured on, I think when they did the Maduro raid, he wasn't part of the press conference. But what he is, and this is very unusual for a presidential administration, he's the chairman of the Finance Committee for the Republican National Committee. And normally, presidents keep their vice presidents as far away as possible from the big donors because they don't want somebody coming for the king. And that's just not how Donald Trump has handled himself. He has empowered Vance to develop these strong relationships with the donors so that there's more money, which this is one of the things going into the 2026 midterm elections. Republicans have a money advantage, at least on hard money in the party. That's where we have an advantage. They still have an advantage on the left-wing billionaires, but as far as raising money for the national committees, we have an advantage. And that's because Trump chose to put Vance in that role and have him develop those relationships. So that is and he's definitely empowered Rubio to lead on the international relations front. And he doesn't seem like he's at all insecure that Rubio is getting all sorts of attention. I think he's almost like a proud father of these folks. Like he likes seeing them do well on the
He
national
does.
stage.
I mean, like I said, the president has a top-notch administration. We call it the kitchen cabinet, right? And so, from Kristi Noem to Lee Zeldin, Marco Rubio, J.D. Vance, and even opposition like Nikki Haley, there's a space for all Republicans. And I think when we look at our bench and our fundraising prowess, we have more money in the bank right now as the RNC versus the DNC. And as we're going through this midterm elections, we see President Trump out on the campaign trail as if he was on the ballot. And I hope he's successful in, not having a lame duck tenure after the midterm elections.
Yeah.
We need to keep the House. We definitely need to keep the Senate so that he can pass more of these bills that, delivers on his promises to the American people. And that's why I'm so looking forward to tonight's State of the Union address.
Yeah. So, what do you expect from the State of the Union? I have a few thoughts myself, but I'm curious, like, what is it you would, if you were giving the speech, what would you want to tell people about the last year, and what do you think the State of the Union is, and what do you think he will tout?
Well, that's a catch-22, Dustin, because I wasn't born here, so I couldn't be giving the State of the Union.
Well, you could be the speechwriter.
Hypothetically, I'm looking for a lot of things. The president was recently voted down by the Supreme Court on his, emergency powers, IEPA tariffs.
Mm-hmm.
And so he definitely called out the Supreme Court justices, specifically the 3 conservative justices that ruled against him.
Yeah.
My humble opinion, I would have rather that they brought that back to the legislative body as a reasonable argument, as they are co-equal members, co-equal branch of government. And so I think they put the president's economic agenda relating to tariffs, in a bit of an uncertainty, especially not understanding how the refunds, if they do need to be refunded, these companies and countries, how and what that would look like.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing if he jabs at the Supreme Court justices, which I hope that he doesn't. I'm seeing him look more presidential, and so I'm hoping that he sticks with that more presidential disposition tonight. But sometimes he just can't help himself, and he does go in for the dig. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. But I do believe the president will tout his economic agenda. He has delivered on eggs, on gas, on the economy, on a more sustainable tax return for the whole entire country. I was recently on Newsmax and they asked about the economic agenda for the president. And I was so proud because I wanted to just tout that I recently.
Something just happened there.
I recently filed my taxes and couldn't wait to start my Trump accounts. And so I just said to the hosts and the guests, panelists, you get a tax cut and you get a tax cut and you get a tax cut. I had my Oprah Winfrey moment, Dustin. But, I do believe he'll speak strong on the economy, what he's already done to deliver on the border, safety, and crime is down 20% overall across the country. So he has some major wins, both, in the interior and on the international platform as well.
That's great. I tracked this in our public.
I'm not hearing you.
Okay. I think I'll ask our producer if he can hear me.
I'm still not hearing you.
Okay. If you check your chat, we'll let you know. I'm going to talk for just a second, and Thomas, if you can let her know if you can hear me. And there we go. Perfect. All right. So we're going to have her come back. There's a bit of a technical difficulty. This is the fun thing about doing a live stream. It's a high wire act. But what I was going to say is to what Scherie was just saying. We track this in in our polling, but also in other people's polling. And one of the best polls, I think, for this, as far as it's whether it's the Trump administration or it's the Biden administration, the Harvard Harris poll, the Harvard Center for American Politics, they track these things. And Thomas, you can bring her back in. It looks like she's back in the green room. There we go. So I was just discussing one of the things.
Dustin?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I'm not hearing you.
Okay, maybe try it one more time to come back in. And Thomas, if you want to help with it. So they track all these issues, and possibly you can hear me now.
Yep, I can.
All right, wonderful. So one of the things I was just pointing out is the Harvard Harris poll. It's one of the more decent public polls for a couple of different reasons. And most of the polling that's done these days is all online panel, which we call panel trash. It's basically, these are internet polls. The Harvard Harris poll is this, but there's a reason why it's better than most of the media polls. And that's because they pull from different online panels, which are these big groups where people opt in to participate in surveys. They get compensated, which is one of the reasons why they're not very good. But the Harvard Harris poll samples a bunch of different panels, and they get kind of a random sample of samples, which is a much better approach. But they track all the policies that any administration is pursuing. And right now they're tracking 22 different policies that President Trump has been pursuing over the last year. 18 of the 22 have support over 50%. The highest is his efforts on prescription drugs. That's 83% support what he's doing there with Trump RX. The second highest, despite what you see in the media, this is fascinating to me. It's in the high 70s. I don't remember the exact number. I think it might be 78% on deporting illegal immigrants who have committed additional crimes while they're here. So that's at the high end of that. Now, the one that's right underneath 50, it's at 49, are the efforts to deport all illegal immigrants. So it's actually so surprising that most of his policies, and even the ones that don't break 50%, are all either in the high 40s or the mid 40s, which tells you that part of it's personal. It's about personality. It's also about party, and people. When you separate the policies from party, people in general are fairly in agreement. But the problem is that's actually a lot more policies than any administration they normally track. They've done so much, and in a way, they flooded the zone. It's hard to get people to even focus on all these things that they've won on. And sometimes you win on something so well, like the border, it's now no longer something people are concerned about. So they're like, what are you going to do for me next? And I think that's one of the problems that the administration has, is they've solved some of these issues too well that it's a problem. And then on the economy, interesting thing that shows up in the polling, it lags. Public opinion lags economic indicators like actual economic activity. So that's to be expected. It is starting to turn. So right now, Americans trust, at least in the Harvard Harris poll, by about 2 points, Republicans over Democrats on the economy. So despite everything you hear, generally that's what they prefer, Republicans to Democrats. And, you don't see that in the media, do you? But
I mean, it's really the messenger, Dustin, right? And so if we don't have more conservative voices out there touting, the wins of this administration, it's just going to be buried as it is when you watch liberal media outlets. But to your point, the president has a number of wins under his belt already, both domestically and internationally. And he has a lot to talk about. At least he said that himself. And tonight's State of the Union Express is going to go on a little bit longer. I'm looking forward to taking it all in, looking forward to taking notes so that I can better understand, what the president is passionate about and what the future has to hold in terms of deliverables. But this one big, beautiful bill had a lot encompassed in it. And right now they're just rolling it out. He just needs good messengers, good ambassadors out on the campaign trail along with him to really allow the American people to understand that his policies have done wonders for the American economy, for our safety, for the interior, for our international relations.
Yeah, it's been a full court press. We have a couple of comments and questions I'm going to try to work in here. Sean says it's remarkable that this administration is pursuing so many policies and accomplishing so much. I'm going to be on Fox 5 DC tonight. If you're watching the live stream, you can watch that. They have a live stream of it, but I'll be doing previewing for the hour beforehand. And thank goodness I don't have to do the post State of the Union coverage, because I was like, I wanted to make sure, like, I get to leave when it starts, right? Because I do not want to be there at 11 o'clock after he may even be done by then. Who knows? So I don't really want to be doing the post coverage. And if people want to watch that later, it'll be on our website if you're watching this after the State of the Union. And that's one of the things that he has a lot to tout. And the problem is he has to tout a lot. So with a 2.5 hour speech or a 2 hour speech, he is, and maybe he's gonna fool all of us, and it's gonna be 38 minutes. But he did that speech in December where he did it in 17 minutes, and that was really surprising.
I think the president has a lot to talk about. And I think the benefit of this State of the Union is there's no Nancy Pelosi standing behind him, ready to rip up the speech. I mean, sight to be seen.
Yeah.
But the president has done a lot for the American people. If only he had more ambassadors, more messengers that really went around to areas that perhaps doubt his deliverables and really sing the song of his accomplishments.
Yeah, I agree. Fred B asked the question, what do you think are some of the main topics Trump will talk about tonight? I think we've covered that, but I want to just acknowledge that Fred had that question. And then another question we have here is, will Trump discuss Iran at all, or will he try to keep that out of the headlines until he is ready to act? What are your thoughts?
Well, that's a fully loaded question, Dustin. We saw what happened with Midnight Hammer. That was quiet. And tell anyone, including the Gang of Eight. And that was a successful mission under the leadership of General Raisin Kane.
Yep.
Saw what happened with Operation Absolute Resolve. That was another successful mission, removing Aura from Venezuela. And so, the president doesn't put out what he's going to do. And if he's going to do something militarily, he's not going to announce it to the world. I mean, we're posturing now closer to our ever have before. Have a lot of our naval on standby. And so I'm hoping that, a deal is made so that Iran doesn't feel the wrath of, the American might. But President Trump has really delivered peace through strength. And that's what we're seeing now on the national stage.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was reviewing some of the surveys that I've been tracking in preparation for today. And one of the things I think is interesting is that most voters say Iran is trying to rebuild its nuclear capability, which I think is not surprising. Additionally, they do not currently believe the U.S. should retaliate against Iran for its attack on protesters. Something I think has been a shame about don't mind the fact that I'm frozen. I'll finish my point. The internet gremlins today are fast at work. One of the things that's interesting is that they let me actually point out the real numbers here. So given that the Iranian regime has gunned down Iranians protesting should the U.S. launch a missile or airstrike in retaliation or not. 71% say they should not, and 29% say that they should. Now, this might partly be why we haven't seen this happen. And I think it's a little bit troubling. I understand why the media covered the Guthrie um, uh, tragedy, whatever the outcome is, we don't know. I understand why, but there's all this careening about on the topics going on in the world. It's estimated anywhere from 10,000 to 70,000 people have been murdered by the Iranian regime since January. The best estimates are mid 30s to low 40s. I mean, that's almost, you can't even imagine what that is. That's large. I think it's more people than Madison Square Garden holds. I mean, this is hard to imagine that many people just being murdered. So part of what's happened with the coverage is that we don't know what's been going on. And the American people don't know that this is happening. So I think in a way, this is, if the president does bring this up tonight, it would be wise for him to clue people in on what's actually happened and how dangerous this is. And if he needs to do a strike, he needs to do some preparation to get the American people ready, and also understand just what this apocalyptic cult of a country has done to its own people. I mean, there's only been a few regimes in history, not a few, but it's not common to do that level of damage to your own people. And with that, I'm going to refresh and I'm going to come back in. And if you want to say a little bit more about what you expect from the State of the Union.
Absolutely. Well, the president has never been the one to telegraph his next move, and I don't expect him to do so now. However, he did tell the Iranian people that help is on the way. And from what I've seen so far with regards to President Trump, he delivers on his promises. So it's just a matter of time before help is on the way. And whatever that help looks like is yet to be seen. But no one wants to venture off into another war. At least I know the American people doesn't want to. And in part, we've seen the president solve, 8 wars already during his first year in office.
Yeah.
So let's just hope, that the art of the deal comes to the forefront here. Iran wises up and makes a deal to dismantle their nuclear facilities or their nuclear potential going forward. And we can have more peace across the world, because President Trump talks a lot about saving lives versus taking lives.
Yeah. And on the other side of this is very common with the American people. I don't necessarily think it's a problem. There's nuance. So I said 71%. They just don't know what's happened, honestly, because of how the news coverage has been. But 71% say they don't want us to do any kind of retaliation.
That's Dustin. And then we know that, the Iranian government cut off, the internet for, their people. And so it was very hard to really get accurate numbers and to get a sense of what was really happening out there. Thanks to Elon Musk, delivering Starlink, where at some point they were able to get intermittent internet, so that, news can come out of the country, so the American people could have a better understanding of what's going on. But it's suffering, for the Iranian people under the current regime. And, only time will tell what's really going to happen. But I do think that our president, Donald Trump, wants peace, not just in Iran, but across the entire world.
Absolutely. Well, on the flip side of that, so 71% don't want the retaliation for it. At the same time, 76% believe that it's in our interest to do whatever we need to do to stop Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons. So that's part of the conversation. So in a way, from a persuasion perspective, the American people are already on board. In our own polling, we did a big Iran poll last summer after Operation Midnight Hammer, and it is, in our polling, it was in the mid 70s as well. People will not tolerate a nuclear Iran. They will not tolerate it. Americans believe, in our polling, 71% believe that if Iran had a nuclear weapon, they would use it against us or our allies or Israel. They would use it. and they would kill untold numbers of people. So the American people they're pretty sharp when it comes to things like that. I want to come back to one thing from your background. So you're a coalition member of Black Americans for Trump, and I'm curious how that came about and what all the organization has done and what's been its focus and what people should know about that effort.
Well, I was reached out to by, someone in the administration and asked if I wanted to be a member of the coalition, and I happily obliged. I've been in leadership here in my community at the grassroots level for, many, many years now. And I think that's, been noticed, locally with the state party and also the administration. I'm honored and humbled to be a coalition member. And really what we do, and you saw this recently when President Trump celebrated, Black History Month at the White House, is really promote the accomplishments of Black Americans and their contributions to America. And so anyone who says that the president is racist, I'm a big supporter of the president, and I speak to the contrary of that sentiment. We've had the likes of Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, Joy Reid, AOC, Bernie Sanders call President Trump a racist, among others.
Yeah.
And he's not a racist. He's done a lot for African Americans. In his first term, he delivered the Platinum Plan, which outlined a comprehensive set of accomplishments for the Black community. He passed the First Step Act, the Second Step Act. He funded historically Black universities and colleges to an unprecedented amount. He funded Black churches. He delivered the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which brought, great jobs to local communities across the country. He had the lowest unemployment rate. And this is just in his first term. And now as we fast forward to his second term, he's delivering for all of America, not just Black Americans. But it is truly an honor to be a part of the coalition. And we are ambassadors that tout the president's message and his accomplishments when asked to do so.
That's wonderful. One of the things that my favorite quote from him from one of those events for Black History Month was, "Have a great Black History Day, Black History Week, Black History Month. Have a great Black History Year."
Yeah,
it's such a Trump thing to say.
The 100th anniversary of Black History Month. And, just to even highlight that particular reception, a lot of Black America who aren't a part of the coalition was on stage, and we saw grandma who told everybody to get off his back, right?
That was fun.
After her, because she's supporting the president. She doesn't want any smoke from anyone who doesn't see what she sees. And President Trump, what was really touching and brought me to tears was when he brought Alice Johnson to the stage and really highlighted the fact that she got a 50-year sentence for something that was a minor offense. Yeah. And said she did the crime, but the time was exaggerated, and he exonerated her and further pardoned her. And now she is his pardon czar, giving opportunities for those who have been wrongly incarcerated or have been giving a too much of a lengthy sentence. So kudos to President Trump for really peeling back the layers and really trying to help the Black community. Unlike our Black president, who didn't do much for the Black community.
Yeah. It's one of the most amazing just individual stories. I put it in, one of the amazing American stories is Alice Johnson. And, in the first term, she was in prison, and now she's in the White House. Like, she has a White House job. That is such a remarkable, shift, and
only in America.
Totally. It's so amazing. And and she's obviously doing a great job with it, and she understands it, and uh, to at your bone level that other people wouldn't understand, and I just find that pretty remarkable to see, and that's something that he does is he reaches down, he grabs issues and brings them up and highlights them, things that other people have ignored.
You know,
Something.
also remarkable, Dustin, the
Mhm.
fact that you have rappers who have been pardoned by the president, but in the music industry, they'll pretend like they don't like the president, right? You have people who have not done, serious crimes who deserve a second chance. And President Trump, through, his pardon czar, Alice Johnson, have really looked at their sentences, looked at their crime, and have given them that second chance at life. And I think that is remarkable within itself. That is a major accomplishment for this administration.
Yeah. Something that was a really interesting thing that he did. So this is a perfect example with the pardons and the Alice Johnson story, where he elevated somebody who could, it personalized it. It made it real for people. And one of the things I saw him do in the first administration, based on my wife's work in the on the healthcare policy side, is he reached down on an issue that had languished for years, and this was around kidney transplants, which is apparently is an issue that affects the African American population more so, and the idea of dialysis. So you had these big corporations that really want dialysis to be the thing. It's so much money. You have people coming in multiple times per week. Medicare and Medicaid payments. I mean, it's a big money industry, and he he found out he had someone in charge of innovation in health insurance or in healthcare, and he saw this issue that was languishing for years, that if you made it easier for people to get transplants, that it would give people freedom. They wouldn't have to go do a dialysis so often, and that you would give them the ability to have their life back, and it was cheaper. And so he reached down and like grabbed this issue and brought it up, and he created reforms. And that's, but that's like one example of things that he just, because he's in one of the problems we talked about earlier, he's done so much. It's also his super strength that he has the capacity to handle lots of different issues and bring them to the fore, almost to the point that everyone's overwhelmed. But it is making so much stuff happen so fast, which is also jarring to the American people in some cases. But it is really truly remarkable that he lifts up these individual stories, and I think he also understands the power of an individual story. And I think he understood how powerful Alice Johnson's personal story was, and how it could that would shift the conversation because of who she is and the story she has to tell. And he finds people like that constantly all over the cabinet, and individual stories like that. And what I really like about her in particular, she's the best example of this, is regular, real Americans. And when I did the 2016 convention, we helped with the televised program for that, and the speeches and all that. They one of the things that he told us that he wanted to have for that, he wanted real people. He wanted to have real people speaking, regular Americans, and that's what he wanted. He didn't want just a bunch of politicians. He wanted real people, and he's done that for every convention since. And it's a common theme for him. He wants to have real people, regular people. Not that politicians aren't real people, but I mean.
I absolutely share your sentiment, Dustin. And to bring this whole conversation full circle, with our conversation about raising up leaders and the next generation of the Grand Opportunity Party, that is precisely what the president is doing. And that's why we have a deep bench. And I look forward to, new faces running for office, cultivating new candidates for public office here in New York City and across the entire country. I think what the president has done has laid out a playbook for the Republican Party to continue to win and win and win.
That's great. So one of the things I want to leave people with is how people can work with you, how they can be a part of what you're out to accomplish with, raising up the future leaders of the party. What are ways that people, what would you like to promote, and how can people work with you?
Well, right now, I am looking for candidates who want to run for public office. That deadline is vastly approaching as petitioning actually starts today.
Wow.
But there is a short window of opportunity, but this is specific to New York City. We don't want seats to go uncontested. That's how the Democrats continue to win. And, what is a win for the Republican Party? In a state like New York, it's really championing our message, going into communities that doesn't often hear our Republican ideology, our Republican messaging, and sees our Republican candidates as a reflection of the communities that they're trying to represent. And so, I'm active on social media platforms. If any of your viewing audience is here in New York and they're interested in running for office at any level, they can definitely DM me. I'm Scherie Murray on all social media platforms. Just check the spelling on the chyron below, and I'll be happy to reach out with you. And so I'm putting my energy right now into really just cultivating candidates for public office, as we have our recent slate from our NYGOP convention outlined, with Bruce Blakeman at the top of the ticket, and an incredible down ballot ticket with the potential to win here in New York State. And I'll leave you with this, Dustin. When President Trump ran here in New York State in the 2024 elections, he got 3.5 million votes from the state of New York.
Yeah.
And if we backtrack a little bit, when Lee Zeldin won for governor, comparing statewide numbers, Lee Zeldin got 2.7 million votes. Now, Kathy Hochul got 3.1 million votes. And what that tells me is that from that gubernatorial race 4 years ago to the president's win, 2 years, back in 2024, we picked up an additional 400,000 votes on the Republican Party.
Yep.
So I'm asking President Trump if he's watching your podcast. So please come back to New York. We need you to come and rally the base. Because if Kathy Hochul's threshold is 3.1 million and President Trump got 3.5 million, Bruce Blakeman could be our next governor of the state of New York.
That would be amazing, and it's possible. Massachusetts had a Republican governor for 8 years recently. It happens in blue states, partly because Democrats have so totally mismanaged them that people are like, finally, we may not like their politics, but we want to put a Republican in charge because we need some competency. So I have to just admire the work that you're doing. It is not easy work to work at the local level, to do the shoe leather work of getting petitions. And that's, yeah, exactly. It is tough work. It's needed work. And what you're talking about for the midterm elections, there are more than enough votes for Republicans to do well in the 2026 midterms if Republicans show up. And we've seen a couple of elections in the last year where Republicans haven't shown up. And it's just incumbent upon the president and the party leadership at all levels to do everything they can to get out the vote and to recruit good candidates to be out there campaigning so that they get out the vote. Because what you're doing is going to make a difference for Blakeman. If you get people in Queens and around the city to run, well, maybe they don't win in a really deep blue district. However, they're going to push the numbers up for the Republicans across the state, and it makes it more likely that you can win the governor's mansion. So that is extremely important work, and I commend you for taking it on.
Well, thank you, Dustin. It's all about, getting our votes out. Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you on your podcast. Kudos to you and your team. Definitely keep up the great work and spreading that message. Every little bit counts.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it. And it's at Scherie Murray on all social media, right? People should check it out. Thank you so much for your time today. And we look forward to having you back on Political Trade Secrets.
I look forward to being on with you on another broadcast in the near future.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Dustin.
So that was Scherie Murray, and you can find her on social media at Scherie Murray. And I love what she's doing there in New York City and Queens, and working at the local party level. That gave you a sense. I know I saw at least one former party chair who has been watching the show, and want to commend the work that she's done as well. It's tough work to work at that level, and we need people who are willing to do that and go out there and win over people for the principles, not the party, but for the principles of freedom of speech and of individual freedom, of responsibility, and family values, all sorts of things that are important within the Republican Party, which is obviously my bias. But we know we have people on both sides. Next week, we're going to have Oddity Bustles, who's a local, has been a local politician in city government, and is on the Democrat side, and we'll get her input on what that's like. But this is where most of it happens, is at that local level. So we really do appreciate Scherie Murray, and do reach out to her if you want to run for office, and also just follow her on social media. You got to see our in studio appearance on Newsmax. She's on Newsmax often, so you can probably see lots of clips of her out there when she's speaking in national media. And if you like the show, the way to really help out is to like and subscribe on YouTube, X, Facebook, or your favorite podcast platforms. It really does help the reach of the show. One of the things I want to point out, we've had a lot of growth over the last couple months on the podcast, and over the last month or so, we have had on average 274,000 members of our audience, views, downloads of the podcast, and we really do appreciate you doing that. It is from people liking and subscribing to the podcast that's made a difference. And again, as I mentioned, we just released this morning our new U.S. Senate poll in Montana, and despite what people would tell you, at least in that race, which could have been a potential place for Democrats to play, it looks like they are going to be blocked out, whether they run a Democrat or an independent. That goes to party branding, by the way, and to what Sherie's talking about, and really winning people over in tough places. That's something the Democrats have not done, to the point that in states like Montana, they did this in Nebraska last cycle. They did it in Kansas a few years ago. They're doing it in Idaho right now. The brand there is so bad that they would rather pretend like they're not a Democrat and run an independent and do that. I want to read a couple of comments. Keep up your inspiring work, Scherie. We need 100 more of you in New York. Thank you for the comment. And then Renee says, show up and speak up. Thank you to everybody who made comments during the show. Thank you for participating in the show, and thank you to all of our wonderful audience out there. This has been another episode of Political Trade Secrets.
Join us next time by subscribing on iTunes, and get show notes and sign up for our newsletter at politicaltradesecrets.com.